Hello everyone, this is Aegon of Astora, and welcome back to my casual playthrough of Dark Souls. This is episode 21, being recorded on Saturday the 5th of September. I hope that each and every one of you out there is having a fantastic day today, whenever it is that you find yourself watching this. So in the previous episode, recall that we picked up the Crest Key, which is said to be a bent Crest Key, the grooves of which are enchanted, and the door is sealed with a powerful spell. So suggesting that the sorcerers of Oolacile were the ones to have locked away whatever is locked away in here. And we can get a clue as to what that is based on this shadow here, which is clipping through the geometry. And the sounds that you're hearing as well. We see a rather interesting sight. A giant carving things that looks a little bit like these carvings.
Very good.
With a rather sizable great bow. Some pretty sweet looking armor. And I'm playing a lot of Scholar of the First Sin, live streaming, that is, as I'm sure many of you are aware, so I was looking in my left hand there for my binoculars. An odd substance on and seemingly inside of his helmet. Oh, he just looked at us, that was scary. Hi, friend.
A visitor, have we? Thou must be the one who freed Artorias. An old friend he was. Thanks to thee, he left this world with honor intact. And here I am, retired and blind. Of little help to thee, I'm afraid. If thou seekest to explore this domain, be wary of a black dragon. I fear thee no match for this terrible beast. Me, there's very little to be said. What good is a dog with no hares to hunt? But I'm lucky to be alive, I suppose. Me? But I'm...
So, couple things that he said, which we're going to touch on in just a minute, but of course, first, two of the best deals, 5 souls, 5 measly souls, for a whole bunch of joy with those 2 carvings. Also noteworthy that he has Homeward Bones, Bone Fragment, reduced to white ash, return to last bonfire used for resting. Bonfires are fueled by the bones of the undead. In rare cases, the strong urge of their previous owners to seek bonfires enchants their bones with a homeward instinct. So, unclear as to why he would have these. Presumably he would have had prism stones equipped so that he might be able to traverse the abyss. But based on where we find him, it's not entirely clear that he ever got anywhere near the abyss. But, and he also has a bunch of upgrade materials, Great Arrows, which says that Great Arrow used by Hawkeye Gough, one of Lord Gwyn's 4 knights, for dragon slaying, requires Great Bow. Gough personally crafts each stone tip, and wraps the shaft tightly with tree bark. And perhaps one of the funniest things that he sells based on what it implies, and also what it implies about the female undead merchant who also sells dung pies. Atrocious fecal waste material. Throw at enemy to build up toxins, but also builds up your own toxicity, because of course you are holding a piece of atrocious fecal waste. Although the stench makes it difficult to carry on one's person, and we have 91 of them, turning an enemy toxic inflicts high damage over a period of time. So why do I find this so funny and worth pointing out? Well, because he is seemingly just selling you his own shit. So yeah, good way to, I guess, a very interesting and innovative take on plumbing. But yeah, so we'll help him out. We'll help get rid of some of his atrocious fecal waste material. Okay, so he's got really nothing else to say to us for now, except...
Farewell, human. Lead thy life as thou seest fit.
And yeah, these would seem to be the carvings of which now we have 4, and we are only missing 1. The one that's missing is easy to forget about because, at least for me it is, because it doesn't exist in Dark Souls 2. Which is kind of a shame. But, yeah, I love these things. And I did say that I was going to show you the other 2 sped up, presumably to normal speed at which they were recorded. So, actually I should equip them before I do that.
Hello, 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 thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
I don't think that will ever get old, really. So we are going to be returning to talk to Go some more later on. So I'm not going to talk about him in great detail for now, but in the meantime, there are a few comments I wanted to get to. The first one was posted on episode 20 by Orlando Archer, who writes, "Hey Aegon, I've always had a weird thought in the back of my mind when it came to the story of the DLC concerning Artorias. Specifically, why did he set out without aid from any other knights? Granted, Go is retired, but Kieran and Ornstein appear to still be active. Given that Artorias was given a pendant designed to combat the Dark of the Abyss, it's likely that Orlando is not yet in decline. It would appear that the DLC takes place after Lord Gwyn departed to Length of Flame, given that the bonfires exist. Meaning that if the threat of the Abyss was so dire, it's likely Orlando would have sent more than just one knight to deal with the problem. Narrative convenience, perhaps? Or was it simply that Orlando was already abandoned and Artorias was simply roaming the land and heard of the danger in Oolacile and went to investigate? Interested to hear your thoughts on it." So I don't really have an answer. I'm not really sure, at least at this point, if I'm capable of clearing up the confusion there, because certainly there is some confusion, not just for you, but I imagine for everyone. On the matter of, or on the issue of whether or not it takes place after or before Lord Gwyn goes to link the fire. It would seem to, possibly based on something that Karen said, to either have taken place, or to be taking place before or around the same time that Lord Gwyn decided, I have no other option, I need to go link the fire, but you guys have to come up with a plan in the meantime. And the piece of dialogue that I'm thinking about is when you say goodbye to Karen. She says, "Let the Lord guide thee." And I believe L was capitalized, so let the Lord guide thee. I can't imagine she would be speaking of anyone other than Lord Gwyn, which might suggest that Lord Gwyn was in fact still, I guess, kicking at that point. Or it could be simply that that's something that they were seemingly programmed, metaphorically speaking, to say for such a long time, that it's something that even if Lord Gwyn had gone to link the flame, that maybe she's still just saying it by force of habit. He says, "Live thy life as thou seest fit, or something like that. So he doesn't say, let the Lord guide thee. Elizabeth, I believe, said, let the flames guide thee. So presumably a replacement for let the Lord guide thee, because the Lord's not around anymore. So there's lots of contradictory details there. As for the bonfires, the existence of the bonfires, that's something I don't really know how that's supposed to work. It's something I've thought about, but I've never quite been able to wrap my head around it. So I apologize if I disappoint you with my I don't know type answer. But as for Artorias, I don't think he came here alone. I think that he came here with Gough, and that at some point Gough was, and notice I pointed out earlier that he has, that there's some debate, I guess, as to whether or not he is in fact blind, or whether he's just not the smartest, or not the sharpest utensil in the drawer, and doesn't realize that his helmet is packed with resin, which is keeping him, obscuring his vision and keeping him from being able to see. And so I think that maybe he came here with Gough, that he also came here with Sif, as we'll later see, but that things just went horribly awry. Anorlando would have had to have known that the Abyss was a major threat, so it's probably inaccurate to say that they underestimated how big of an issue it was. Simply because Lord Gwyn seems to have sent at least 2 of his 4 knights. And just as Artorias, the legend of Artorias, propagated this myth about individual heroic glory, that Artorias was this brave knight who went to the Abyss and single-handedly halted its spread, so too did perhaps Artorias buy into his own prestige, his own manliness, and think, no, I don't need Kieran to accompany me to go to the Abyss. Go get your big rear. We're going to go. Sif, let's go. We got this. Go, you deal with the dragon, and we're going to go deal with the Abyss. And then Artorias went to the Abyss, perhaps not fully understanding what the Abyss is, and that it would be toxic to someone like him, who is not human. And so I think that he probably left without telling Kieran, which likely led Kieran to her reaction that we saw, where she was there mourning his death, not seemingly angry, not angry at us, even though she had to have known that we were the ones to have killed him because we had his soul. And she sensed that. She asked as soon as we spoke to her, is that the soul of the man who fell on this spot? So I think, yeah, to a certain extent, Artorias was a victim of his own notoriety, so to speak. And, yeah. So on the one hand, they couldn't have underestimated the threat that the Abyss was, but on the other hand, they couldn't really overestimate it either, because Artorias was this incredibly gallant knight who was seemingly capable of doing it on his own. Adding to that, you also mentioned Ornstein. And judging by what we learned about Smo, in addition to what we learned, or what we didn't really learn about Ornstein, but judging by what we learned about Ornstein, it would seem that to have placed Ornstein, one of Lord Gwyn's 4 knights, alongside someone like Smo, who was frowned upon so much for grinding the bones of his victims into feed, that they knew they had to have some sort of protection at Anorlando, and but they had to send out the various knights into other locations, because this could very well be taking place at a similar juncture, either during or in the aftermath of Lord Gwyn taking his Silver Knights to fight back the Chaos. So think about the state of of Lord Gwyn's army, if you will, at this point in time, if indeed these things are all taking place around the same point in time, because that's not entirely clear. If indeed that's the case, Lord Gwyn and his Silver Knights, he took a detachment of his Silver Knights, which became the Black Knights, because they were charred by the flames of the Chaos. At the same time, he made sure to leave Ornstein together with Smo, that they would have left someone like Smo to guard the keep at Anorlando, to guard the illusion of Guinevere, would seem to suggest that they just didn't have the manpower to. They were putting out fires, literally and metaphorically, all over the place. And so, even if it's not a matter of hubris or overconfidence on Artorias' part, it would seem almost to have just been, we don't really have anyone else. So go take your dog and take the big giant dragon slayer and go deal with things. Fix it. Make it better. So I don't know if that answers any of your questions or whether it makes any more sense after that, I guess, 10-minute rant. Not really a rant. 10-minute exposition, perhaps? I don't know. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Sorry if I didn't fully answer your question, but I do very much appreciate you asking. Okay, we actually have a fair number of souls, and we have leveled up in between the previous episode and this one, and we might, in fact, level up a little bit more. But I'm not really sure what it is that we need to level up at this point. Suppose we could start leveling our vitality, because our vitality is rather, yeah, we'll do that. Only enough for 2 levels, but we'll get our vitality to 25 or something, and then maybe leave it there. We did leave off having unlocked the shortcut. So we are going to continue to proceed through the Oolacile Township. And, I suppose to continue our descent into the abyss is probably a better way of putting it. Oops. Certain controls, as I've been working while live streaming over the last 3 or 4 days, been playing Scholar of the First Sin, there are certain things that I'm probably going to mess up at first, so I hope you will forgive me for that in advance. You can see to the left of our crosshairs there is another enemy who reminds me a fair bit of a couple of different enemies from Bloodborne. So once again, I'm going to suggest that you can see the design direction that Miyazaki's team was going in as they were doing this DLC and preparing to undertake development of Bloodborne. And I really do think that you can see the influences and how it is that certain characters took the shape that they did. Oh, another person we have to... Oh, and we just gained humanity there for that kill, I think. Another thing that we do still need to do is we're going to go speak to Chester and talk about him a little bit more. I'm not sure if we'll get to that in this episode, because I do want to try and take out Manus in this episode. I'm not sure if we'll be able to do that, but we'll see. I am planning on showing off and you'll notice that we're fast rolling now, even though we're wearing our full set. We have the Oolacile Ivory Catalyst, and we're using a Black Knight Sword +5. And the reason for that is that we upped our endurance to 50. So that way we don't have to make decisions about what weapons we do and don't want equipped. What weapons we do and do not want equipped, based solely on whether or not we're fast rolling. At this point, we're going to be fast rolling pretty much no matter what. That is, at least until we are going to be forced to take off our Ring of Favor and Protection. And so that's another reason I wanted to start leveling up Endurance and Vitality, because we are going to pop off the Ring of Favor and Protection. And the reason for that is that I'm not going to cheese Manus, but I do want to show you how it is that Manus can be cheesed. It does require a fair bit of setup, but it is possible. And we can see once again, the closer we get to the Abyss proper, or I guess not technically the Abyss proper, but the dark chasm of the Abyss, we can see just more of this abyssal oil strewn about. So before I actually fight this enemy, let's talk about it for 30 seconds or so. This guy looks a lot, to me, in terms of the design similarities, seems to perhaps have been the inspiration for the undead giant in the Chalice dungeons. I believe it's Lower Thumeru level 2, or layer 2. The one who has kind of the balls and chains connected all over his body, and he also has a huge cyst, just like this guy does. Alternatively, he does also kind of remind me, in terms of how he fights, he does kind of remind me of the church giants, and especially the one who is in the little side area where with all of the twin bloodstone shards. So I don't know if that's just me, or if I'm just reading too much into it, but based on his design, those two enemies from Bloodborne would seem to have been at least partially based on him. And he can hit very, very hard. And doesn't take a lot of damage. And I'm trying to figure out just what he is. I know he drops the chainmail stuff. And I believe he does respawn, so that means he's not a unique enemy. Although he is unique in the sense that this is, I believe, the only spot you can fight this guy. Don't believe he can be backstabbed. Let's see. No, unless I missed it. But yeah, anyone who's played Bloodborne and is familiar with the boss that I'm talking about, the Undead Giant, let me know. Am I crazy in seeing the similarities here? Or in seeing similarities in general? Because he really does remind me of that boss. Yeah, chain helm. Which, let me remind myself about the description for that, if there is anything interesting. A chainmail helm of thin interlinking rings of steel. It is common throughout the human world since it can be easily produced, is not too heavy, and offers good defense. Knights may favor flashy armor, but for warriors on the battlefield, anything is fine as long as it keeps them alive. And so him dropping that would seem to... The purpose of that drop would seem to be to suggest, to point out that that thing was once human, and was once a human warrior. So once again, these statues are wielding... Is it Witch Tree Branch? I just went by it. White bark. So that would seem to be an actual piece of white bark that they're all holding. All of them are headless. Don't know what that might signify. But they're holding the actual thing upon which the Oolacile Ivory Catalyst is based. Very eerie. So I don't know if there's any actual lore to support this point. But once again, I'm going to put a link in the video description to one of the lore videos, which really I found amazing in my early days of trying to understand the lore of Dark Souls. And that is Terra Mantis, his video on Manus. And I believe in that video, he, speculation or otherwise, suggested that this was the cell within which Manus was held. Recall that Chester said that Oolacile had brought this upon itself, in that they were convinced by that toothy serpent. Didn't say which one, but we can assume Cath, and probably safely so, but also possibly Frampt or some other serpent, because in the Dark Lord ending we do see many, many serpents. But by one of the serpents to unearth primeval man. And for whatever reason, at least according to this video by Terra Mantis, the Oolacile sorcerers were interrogating Manus in this cell. And he suggested also, again, probably speculation, but I do find it very interesting, suggested also that Manus was concealing a pendant that he had, and that at one point one of the sorcerers took it from him, found out that he was hiding it, and took it from him, that he was being tortured day in, day out, and that they would torture him until death, and then that they placed this bonfire here. And again, I don't really understand bonfires. I'm not claiming to, but I'm just communicating and sharing what I found interesting about this video. That they placed this bonfire here so that they could torture him until death, and then he would just wake up and they could torture him again. Very, very dark stuff. But also that it came to a point where enough was enough. He had had enough, and he just started hitting this wall, and all of a sudden the dark awoke from within him, and he burst out into the abyss, and thus the abyss was born. Or at least, thus he became the overseer or the caretaker of the abyss. Because recall that, thanks to Jeux Sans Frontières, who linked to a translation thread on Reddit of, potential or a series of translation clarifications, whereby it was said that father in Manus, Father of the Abyss, is a little bit different in the original text than the term father, which implies biological father. But in the original Japanese text, the meaning would seem to be closer to something akin to a caretaker or an overseer. So yeah, not really sure what to make of all of that, but it's all very interesting. And Aegon is clearly having a reaction to the abyss, or he's just kind of scared. Not really sure if he wants to proceed at this point, but sorry Aegon, we gotta do it. We gots to do it. We have to show the people something I learned from Franz, a German spy. I believe in his Rust and Relaxation playthrough, maybe? Or it was Spy's Misadventures in Lordran, I think, actually. Where he showed off how you could cheese Manus. Always forgetting about... Oh, a white titan chunk. Very nice. Always forgetting about crystal lizards. And we can see in the distance more red eyes. I do want to take out the sorceress, or the sorcerer, but I don't know which one is the sorcerer and which one is just a normal enemy. But there's one down. And if you can aggro them one at a time, that is definitely best practice. Forget the Tomb of the Giants. The Tomb of the Giants is scary too, but this place takes it to a whole new level, I think. Note also that it's called the Abyss, but this, aside from being incredibly dark, doesn't seem a whole lot like an abyss. Oh, that was the sorcerer we just shot. Okay, good to know. But yeah, but there's actually ground here. And perhaps a clue for that would be in the name Chasm of the Abyss. I know what a chasm is, but I will have to look up the proper definition for it so that it might more closely point us in the direction of an answer there. We just picked up Dark Bead. Abyss sorcery discovered by an Oolacile sorcerer on the brink of madness. Fires successive dark orbs. In contrast to standard soul sorceries, Abyss sorceries are weighty and inflict physical damage. Perhaps a human soul is closer to matter in its humanity. Very interesting. And my ability to navigate the Abyss, as I've mentioned, I am rather out of practice on the DLC, but my ability to navigate the Abyss is a little bit compromised, just by the fact that this is the one place that's always kind of freaked me out in Dark Souls 1, and I wasn't even aware that DLC existed until I was in... I think I was invading in the forest, or having been invaded in the forest, and someone used an arch tree carving, and I said, I thought for a minute I was actually just going crazy, because I hadn't seen anything like that, or heard anything like that in the game prior to that. I sent a message to the person, and they're like, oh yeah, you get it in the DLC. I was like, what, there's DLC? So, yep. And we see something down there that is... This is the part that unsettled me most about the Abyss. Were these humanity sprites. Who look an awful lot like humanity. This black sprite is called humanity, but little is known about its true nature. If the soul is the source of all life, then what distinguishes the humanity we hold within ourselves? So you're probably better off not fighting these things up close. Because these things are perpetually drawn to you. And they don't actually hurt you. Well, they do hurt you when they pass through you. But they don't actively attempt to do you harm. but they are drawn to you. You see how they all saw we were there. Hey, this guy over there, let's go say hello. And I'll show you what happens when they pass through you. It hurts. You see we have 8 humanity, not 10, so our item discovery is a little lower than it otherwise could be. Otherwise, I'm sure at least one of these guys would have dropped a humanity for us, but no luck there. But we are going to leave them for now, because we have somewhere important to go first. And it has something to do with this thing right here. Does that look familiar to any of you? It's Alvina. What is she doing here? Leading us in this direction. Let's open up the shortcut first. So it would seem that at some point, Artorias would have realized the folly of his ways, and realized that they weren't going to halt the spread of the Abyss. That there was something about the Abyss that repelled them. It was poisonous to them. But that seemingly isn't harming us. We're perfectly fine down here. It's a little bit dark, it's a little bit scary, but we are perfectly fine. Cleansing Great Shield. The steel Great Shield used by Knight Artorias, who succumbed to the Abyss. Artorias, deeply scarred by the Abyss, used this to form a barrier to protect his compatriot Sif. Although this drained the shield, its magic defense remains high. That is so incredibly sad. But also shows that Artorias, who had some sort of relationship with Kieran, whether it was just a friendship or a romantic relationship, is really irrelevant. But much like the humans, Artorias, who is a god or something that isn't human, had feelings. He felt guilty about having brought Sif into the Abyss, and he couldn't do anything about it. So he did what little he could and provided Sif with a protective barrier with his shield. And got the heck out of here. Maybe in an attempt, because recall that we fight Artorias very close to where Gough is imprisoned. So maybe Artorias was going to, I don't know what Gough would have done, but to attempt to get Gough to come with him. Maybe Artorias was going to seek the help of Kieran. I don't know. Or maybe he just wasn't thinking at all. Because if we're going to go by the lore, I guess I added by reinserting the cut dialogue back into the boss fight, Artorias was kind of losing his mind. The Abyss had done things to him that he hadn't anticipated it would do. Okay, the big one was the one on the right. And so this is going to be a twin humanity. Small one on the left was a medium-sized one, regular humanity. So, in returning kind of to our question of, from much earlier in the playthrough, about twin humanity and whether perhaps that signified that, as many people suggested, that the bearer of that humanity was pregnant at one point or another. I don't know. It would seem to just suggest that some people, whether that means they're pregnant or not, some people just have more humanity. And so these small ones aren't necessarily children, as much as they are just people who had less humanity. What that means, I don't really know. But if we're going to take it literally, and by its definition outside of the game, have some humanity is a phrase, or is it? I'm not really. So someone who is more humane would, I guess, have more humanity, and thus translate into a bigger sprite. So those sprites are perhaps the remnants of the people who were indigenous to this part of Oolacile that is currently submerged in the Abyss. Not entirely, but at least in part. Black Flame, a pyromancy discovered from the dark of the Abyss by a pyromancer who wandered into Oolacile. Conjure a black flame in one's palm. Black flames are weighty and inflict physical damage, enough to smack away the mightiest of shields. So a pyromancer who wandered into Oolacile. Maybe Solomon? Recall that we learned about Solomon. Where was it? Or at least we learned about him from Kaylana's dialogue. It's Engie, Carmina, Kaylana. Okay. But she the way that Kaelana spoke about Salamon, and this isn't something that I've thought about at all. I honestly just came up with that as the possible identity of this pyromancer. But the way Kaelana spoke about Salamon was, I don't want to say longingly, but she seems to project a certain, I can't believe that guy went and messed it all up. He made such a name for himself, he was so brilliant, and then he went and screwed it up. So there is another carving up there. We might as well go grab it before we go do the boss fight. Because I think we are going to need some more Estus before we even attempt that anyway. So here's a corpse hanging on seemingly for dear life, the edge of this cliff. This is the one that wasn't brought over to Dark Souls 2. Why? I'm not entirely sure, but it is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if it means anything. In fact, I doubt it means anything. It's just the one that was most difficult to take out of its appropriate context because it's found in the abyss.
Help me.
This head says, "Help me." Look again. Can you hear the desperate plea? Yep, never thought a carving would be so kind of dramatic in that way. I tend to die when doing that drop, so let's do this. Alright, this is the time when we say goodbye to the Ring of Favor and Protection. Alright, so I mentioned earlier on that I was going to show everyone how to cheese Manus. It's been a long time since I've done this, so let's hope that I don't screw it up. So you can see his eyes right there. So that's Manus, just sort of hanging out waiting for someone to mosey on through the fog gate. You'll also notice that we are using the Black Bow of Ferris, which is the bow with the highest range in the game. We are also using the Hawk Ring, and we are in Red Tearstone mode. we hit him, and as soon as we hit him, I moved. There we go. So that's how you cheese Manus. Just keep shooting him, and he will eventually die. And then when you walk through the fog gate, you will be greeted with a "You defeated" message. We could use a silver pendant, but I'm terrible at actually timing it, so I'm not going to do that. Started off really, really poorly. Then started doing pretty well. Got to the point where I was, okay, I'm pretty sure we got this. Got what I thought was the last hit on him. Took my hands off the controller. Realized as soon as I did, he's not dead. Dark Souls. Ensuring that you don't get overly confident since 2011. Alright, well that time certainly wasn't pretty either, but second time's a charm, I guess. Not really sure what to say about this. She's non-communicative. And yeah, She would seem to have been kidnapped by Manus. For what reason, I do not know. We do have the soul of Manus, which is incredibly unique in how it looks. But that also looks a fair bit like the humanity sprite, but surrounded by just black tendrils of stuff. Soul of Manus, Father of the Abyss. This extraordinary soul is a vicious, lukewarm lump of gentle humanity. Ancient Manus was clearly once human, but he became the Father of the Abyss. Again, doesn't mean biological father. After his humanity went wild, eternally seeking his precious broken pendant. So, just as the item description suggests, and we can see it side by side with the humanity sprite itself, it's a sprite of humanity that went wild. But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.